Here we are with another episode of Hey, I think you should see this. In a previous vid, I'd talked about a rather unusual, possibly unique, nearly unique pleating style in which the client wanted the kilt pleated to the stripe, but also wanted to avoid the kilt looking like an HLI, Highland Light Infantry, or Seaforth kilt. So he decided he wanted to alternate the stripes. We do see this in kilts of the Canadian Scottish Regiment and the former Royals, I think. So what I've found, so I've proceeded, and getting towards there's going to be my 40th pleat because, again, we decided we had to incorporate. We couldn't skip. We couldn't be doing 3.5 or 3.25 inches and then skipping 7 inches because it wasn't, or 6.5 inches at least, because I was going to create problems on the back of the kilt in wider versus narrower pleats. So I've been steaming along and I've learned a couple of things. First off is that we get the sort of trompe l'oeil effect. The eye feels there's some tricks being played on the eye, and that these pleats are the same width apart, but because we're pleating to the middle of what I think is a blue line there, very hard to see. These dark pleats look wider, even though when I throw the tape against them, they're as wide as the adjacent pleats. So the thing to do there is to resist, either to account for it right from the beginning and narrow the pleats a little bit, which means, frankly, you're going to sew a bunch of pleats and they go, back up, take the pleats apart and then sew them up again. So you can either account for that from the beginning and purposely make a dark pleat like this a little bit narrower. But again, that's a very subjective thing about how the eye perceives it, right? Or alternately, realize what's going on and don't suddenly change horses midstream, so to speak. The other thing I found too is because this cloth is so very dark, and I believe I've talked elsewhere about how different textures of cloth, even dyed with the same dye, will look different. This looks far darker than the modern green, I think it's green 40, that we see in a harder tartan that's woven smooth. This is a very rough, or comparatively rough yarn, and so consequently it absorbs more light and it looks darker. So the problem I had, which I had to back up and undo a pleat and sew up again, was I struck a line, but I hadn't chalked it, and I wound up sewing a bit of a crooked seam. So what I'm doing now is between these, to find the right spot. Okay, it's just a nudge over 6.5, so I'm going just a hair over 3.25. Now again, 2.5 and 8.5 is the bottom of our fill. And I make that measurement again. Here, again, nudge over 6.5, so a hair over, like my measurement system, a hair and a nudge, and such like that. No, I had to cut a special template because these were about the narrowest. I can't remember the last time I sewed pleats as narrow as this. They're 3/8 of the hip and 5/16 of the waist, and 5/16 is literally the width of a chalk line. In fact, that's a bit broad. I'm gonna have to sharpen this chalk. It's the width of a narrow chalk line, and I having to work sort of to micrometer specifications annoys me a little bit. So basically, the each of these is to achieve the 3/8 of the waist. Sorry, the 3/8 of the hip. I'm sewing to the outside of the chalk lines. And to achieve the 5/16 of the waist, I'm sewing to the inside of the chalk lines. But as I said, generally these two marks are good enough, and then I pin it and stretch it and sew a straight line. But I found that I was going awry because I can't. It's so dark I can't see the yarns. So I decided, after a bit, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to get frustrated by making that mistake again. So I'm just using a straight edge, right, to mark this, so that when I'm, of course, just for the purpose of the video, that thing's a little bit crooked, but we're just going to sail past that for now because I'm explaining what I'm doing, not I can pull this apart and mark it a second time. So yeah, this part proceeds pretty much as normal, where I pin at the waist and the top, and then the bottom of the fell. And again, I'm checking with my template, because when we're working to tolerances as fine as this, it's easy to put in an error, and even if it's a 1/16 of an inch, it's literally less than the width of an individual yarn. These, if we allow them to go unchecked, these mistakes will snowball. They will mount up. So again, that extra chalk line that I don't normally have to deal with is helping me immeasurably right here. So pinned up, and away we go. I think this is going to be very striking. This is just about unique in my experience, and this again is this heritage cloth that I never expect to see the like of again. So I'm going to keep motoring away with this. Oh, incidentally, what I've just showed you, I think some time ago somebody had asked me about sewing a kilt up from plain color cloth. There'd be just no tartan design at all. You know, this pattern of weave, but no color variation, just a single bolt of cloth. And how to do that? Well, of course, when we're sewing a kilt with a tartan, of course, we just have to find the next line or the next element of the cloth we're sewing to. But on plain cloth, of course, we can't do that. But if you take from your last seam, if you decide that, let's just say you're going to go with a 6-inch pleat, which means the fold is going to be 3 inches. You can just, from your last pleat, you can just measure 6 inches, call that the edge or call that the center, as long as it's consistent the whole way along. Because otherwise, as I said, if you're sewing a plain color kilt without those marks, you're going to find that you'll have done a bunch of pleats and you realize that without you paying attention, they've gotten progressively narrower or progressively deeper or possibly even lopsided. And each of those causes a problem. You'll have to back up and do it again. So there, a bit long-winded, but I hope that helps. Thank you, and carry on.